1931, New York City, Lower East Side, 2:14 a.m. Meyer Lansky stood by the window of a narrow office above a kosher bakery, counting footsteps on the street below. Not money, not men. Footsteps because footsteps told you everything. Fear, confidence, hesitation. Across town in Harlem, another man was doing the same thing in his own way, Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson King, without a crown muscle, without noise. That night, neither of them knew the other yet, but the city already did. The underworld was changing, and one meeting would redraw every line that mattered. Meyer Lansky was not a gangster in the way newspapers understood gangsters. He didn't shout, he didn't threaten, he didn't carry himself like a man who needed to prove anything. 5'4", quiet eyes sharp enough to cut glass, and a mind that never stopped calculating. By 1931, the Italians called him the accountant, the Jews called him a genius, and the cops called him impossible to catch. Lansky didn't run rackets with fists. He ran them with math probabilities, margins, risk. Prohibition had turned New York into a casino, and Meyer Lansky was the house. Rum from Canada, heroin routes through the ports, casinos in Florida, laundering money so clean it walked into banks wearing suits. But Harlem was different. Harlem was chaos money everywhere, and nobody truly in control except one man. Bumpy Johnson. Harlem's numbers, racket printed millions every year, small bets from poor people stacked into fortunes, and the Italians wanted it bad. Luciano wanted it, Costello wanted it, Gambino wanted it, and every time they tried to muscle in, someone disappeared or came back broken. Bumpy wasn't just violent, he was strategic, and worse, he was respected. He paid rent for families, he paid lawyers, for kids, he stopped cops from beating shop owners. Harlem didn't see him as a criminal, they saw him as protection, and that made him dangerous. Meyer understood something the Italians didn't. You don't conquer a neighborhood that loves its king. You make a deal with him. The problem was, no one could get close enough to even talk to Bumpy Johnson without permission. Harlem didn't trust outsiders, and especially not quiet Jewish men from the Lower East Side. But Meyer had been watching numbers runners, watching police patterns, watching who paid who and when. He knew Bumpy was smart enough to understand leverage. He also knew Bumpy was boxed in by one thing: race. Italians could move through the city with protection, Jews could negotiate, but black gangsters were always one raid away from prison or death. That was the pressure point. Meyer didn't want Harlem. He wanted stability. If Harlem burned, everyone lost money. So he sent a message, not with a threat, not with cash, but with information. A name, a date, a warning about an Italian move that hadn't happened yet. When that move failed, Bumpy Johnson knew someone on the outside was seeing the board clearly. A week later, a note came back. No signature, no threats, just a place and a time. A bar on the edge of Harlem neutral ground. No guns, no crews, one man each. Most people would have sent a proxy. Meyer Lansky didn't. He walked in alone. If you want stories like this, the real ones, the meetings that changed everything, hit subscribe now, because this is only the beginning. When Meyer stepped into that bar, the room went quiet, not because anyone recognized him, but because instinct told them something important had just entered the building. Bumpy Johnson was already there, sitting still, eyes forward waiting. Two kings from different worlds about to speak for the first time. And nothing in New York would be the same after they did. The bar smelled like cheap whiskey, old wood, and tension, the kind that settles when men who decide fates sit too close to each other. Bumpy Johnson didn't turn when Meyer Lansky walked in. He already knew he was there because silence moves before sound. Meyer took the chair across from him. No handshake, no smile, just eye contact. For a long moment, neither spoke. That was the test. Who would rush first? Bumpy finally broke it. "You the one been saving me trouble without asking for credit." Meyer nodded once. "You the one everyone keeps trying to kill and keeps failing." Bumpy smiled thin. "That's because they keep trying the wrong way." That was the opening. Meyer leaned forward just enough to show intent, not weakness. Italians want Harlem because it prints money, but they don't understand Harlem. They squeeze it, it explodes, cops come, everyone loses. Bumpy didn't blink. And you understand it. I understand math, Meyer said. Pressure plus greed equals mistakes. You're surrounded by people who want what you have, and the only thing keeping them back is violence. Violence gets expensive. Bumpy took a slow sip. So what you want, accountant? Meyer didn't flinch at the nickname. Stability. You keep Harlem. You keep control. Italians get a percentage without stepping foot here. Jews handle the money routes, the laundering, the lawyers. Everyone eats, nobody bleeds. Bumpy laughed once sharp. Italians don't share, they take. Meyer nodded. They take until it costs more than it's worth. And right now, Harlem costs too much. Bumpy studied him. Now, really studied him, not his size, not his clothes, but his certainty. You think Luciano will listen to you? Meyer's eyes didn't leave Bumpy's. He already does. That landed. Bumpy knew names, he knew hierarchy, and he knew Lucky Luciano didn't listen to many men. You set this up without asking me, Bumpy said. Meyer answered calmly, because if I asked you first and you said no, I'd have nothing to offer. Now I do. Outside, a police siren passed and neither man reacted. They were beyond that noise. Bumpy leaned back. You know what happens if you cross me? Meyer nodded. I wouldn't be here if I didn't. Then you also know what happens if Italians cross me? Bumpy continued. Meyer nodded again. And you know I can't go to war with them forever. There it was. Truth without weakness. Meyer took it and placed it on the table carefully. This isn't surrender. This is insulation. You stay king. They stay rich. I stay alive. Bumpy looked down at the table, then back up. Percent. Meyer named it. Low enough to insult Italians, high enough to keep them calm. Bumpy thought for 10 seconds that felt like 10 minutes to everyone watching from the edges. Finally, he stood. We try it. Once. If they break it, I don't come to you. I come to them. Meyer stood as well. Fair. They didn't shake hands. Kings didn't need gestures. When Meyer walked out, Harlem watched him go, confused, unaware history had just shifted quietly without bullets. That night, Meyer Lansky didn't celebrate. He went back to his office and started moving numbers because deals only mattered if they held. Across town, Bumpy Johnson made phone calls, not threats, instructions. Harlem would stay calm, Italians would stay out, and anyone who didn't understand that would be educated. Within weeks, the numbers racket ran smoother. Police pressure eased, Italian crews backed off. The city felt it before it understood it. Money moved cleaner. Violence dropped, profits rose. Lucky Luciano called Meyer in. What did you promise him? Lucky asked. Meyer answered nothing he didn't already own. Luciano laughed. That's why you're dangerous. The meeting between Meyer Lansky and Bumpy Johnson never made the papers, never hit a police report, but every serious player knew. It was the moment race lines blurred, business trumped pride, and the underworld learned a new rule. Power didn't always come from guns. Sometimes it came from knowing who to sit across from and when to stand up. The deal held, and that was the most dangerous part, because when nothing explodes, men start believing it never will. By 1933, Prohibition was dying, and every crew in New York was repositioning for what came next. Booze money dried up numbers, gambling unions, docks construction, all of it became the new battlefield. Meyer Lansky saw it months before anyone else. He started shifting capital South Florida, Cuba, offshore accounts fronts, inside hotels and racetracks. Bumpy Johnson felt it on the street. Fewer Italian faces, more cops asking quiet questions. More politicians suddenly interested in Harlem again. The agreement with Meyer had bought time, not safety. And time was something Bumpy used well. He expanded the numbers operation, tightened collections, paid faster, kept violence invisible. Harlem prospered quietly while the rest of the city tore itself apart over shrinking margins. Italians noticed. So did the feds. Meyer began hearing his name in places he didn't like. Courtrooms, Senate hearings whispered between agents who couldn't prove anything but knew everything. He warned Bumpy, "Pressure is coming from above, not from the street." Bumpy answered, "Pressure is always from above until it hits the neck. Then it's from everywhere." They met again, not in Harlem, not in New York, but in Miami neutral sun loud enough to hide conversations. This time they spoke less because trust had replaced curiosity. Meyer explained the new structure commissions boards shared ownership, a system where no single man could move without others knowing. Bumpy listened, then asked one question. "Where does that leave me?" Meyer didn't dodge it. Exposed if you stand alone, protected if you sit at the table. Bumpy didn't like tables built by Italians, but he liked prisons less. He agreed to a limited seat, indirect power, no spotlight. That decision saved his life more than once. When Lucky Luciano went down, the structure held. When mobs turned on each other, Harlem stayed stable. But stability has a cost. Younger men wanted blood, wanted expansion, wanted respect, louder than money. Bumpy had to control his own side now, not outsiders. Meyer faced his own storms, investigations, arrests, interrogations. He beat with lawyers, numbers, and patience. Every time someone tried to pull him into the mud, he stepped sideways and let them fall alone. By the early 40s, New York underworld looked different, quieter, sharper, more corporate. That was Lansky's world. Harlem still had soul, still had chaos, but it answered to rules now. And those rules traced back to that first silent meeting. The war years came, contracts, military supply docks, unions. Meyer moved through all of it untouched. Bumpy held Harlem together while half his peers went to prison or graves. They didn't talk often anymore. They didn't need to. When one shifted, the other felt it. When one paused, the other adjusted. That was the real alliance, not friendship, not loyalty, but mutual survival. Men around them aged fast, died fast, burned out. Meyer stayed small, invisible. Bumpy stayed present, respected. Two different answers to the same question: how do you hold power without losing yourself to it? The city kept changing, but the lines they drew stayed. And long after others forgot how it started, the underworld still followed the shape of a deal made without handshakes, without witnesses, without noise. One meeting, two men, and a city that never realized how close it came to tearing itself apart. By the late 1940s, the city looked calm on the surface, but underneath it was tighter than ever. Every dollar moved through channels Meyer Lansky helped design, and every street-level operation in Harlem still answered to Bumpy Johnson whether they liked it or not. But age changes calculations. Meyer was thinking about legacy, about insulation, about disappearing without ever leaving. Bumpy was thinking about survival because Harlem never let its kings retire. Young crews tested limits, small violations, late payments, disrespect dressed up as ambition. Bumpy crushed them fast, not with spectacle, but with certainty. One warning, then silence. Meyer watched from a distance, understanding that visible power burns faster than quiet control. Federal pressure increased, committees' files, names, faces, photos. Meyer's name surfaced again and again, always just out of reach. He adjusted, moved money, shifted partners, sacrificed pawns to protect the board. Bumpy felt the squeeze differently. Police stops, indictments, probation traps designed to wear him down, not take him out. He knew the system didn't need him dead, it needed him predictable. That's when the difference between them became clear. Meyer could step away anytime. Bumpy couldn't step anywhere without Harlem moving with him. They met one last time quietly. No ceremony, no tension, just acknowledgement. Meyer told him, "I'm pulling back, going colder." Bumpy answered, "Do what you have to do. Just don't forget who kept this place from burning when everyone else wanted to profit from the fire." Meyer didn't argue because it was true. Without Harlem stable, the entire structure would have collapsed decades earlier. Their alliance had outlived wars, bosses, commissions, and headlines. It was never written, never spoken publicly, but it shaped everything beneath the surface. When Bumpy walked out that last time, he knew how his story would end, not in comfort, not in safety, but on his terms. Meyer knew his would end in obscurity, which to him was victory. Years later, when Bumpy died in Lenox Lounge, the city barely reacted. No riots, no wars, just a quiet understanding that an era had closed. Meyer read about it in a small column, folded the paper, and went back to his numbers. The underworld didn't mourn, it adjusted because that's what it had learned from both men. Power doesn't announce itself. It organizes, waits, and survives. And long after names faded, the structure they built together, without trust, without friendship, without sentiment, still stood invisible, holding everything in place. Meyer Lansky outlived almost everyone who ever tried to control him, and that wasn't luck, it was design. By the time the 1960s arrived, the world he helped build was already dissolving into something new. Federal laws changed, surveillance changed, money moved faster than men could follow. Meyer adapted again, quieter, thinner, more invisible than ever. He watched former kings fall to indictments, betrayals, bullets, prison sentences that erased names overnight. He never reached for power directly because he understood the last lesson the street never learned. The man you see is the man you lose first. Bumpy Johnson had played his role perfectly for his time holding Harlem together when it needed a shield, not a spotlight. When he died, the structure didn't collapse because Meyer had already made sure it didn't depend on one heartbeat. That was the real outcome of their meeting decades earlier. Not peace, not friendship, but continuity. The underworld stopped being emotional and became operational. Crews followed percentages, not pride, territories, not egos, silence, not threats. That shift traces back to one night, one bar, one conversation where two men from opposite worlds chose logic over blood. The Italians never fully trusted Harlem again, and Harlem never fully trusted outsiders, but money kept moving because rules replaced chaos. When Meyer finally faded from public view, most people didn't even notice. No funeral crowds, no street legends, just a man who had already won by leaving nothing behind to take. Historians argue about who really ran New York guns or politics, Italians or Jews, but they miss the point. It was neither. It was the men who understood timing, restraint, and when to speak once and never again. That's what Meyer Lansky brought to the table, and that's why Bumpy Johnson listened. One meeting changed the underworld because it taught everyone watching the same lesson. The loudest man isn't the most powerful. The most feared man isn't the safest, and the smartest move is often the one nobody ever hears about. If this story showed you how real power actually works, hit subscribe right now. Because these are the stories that never get told. The quiet meetings, the unseen decisions that shaped history from the shadows. More are coming, and the next one goes even deeper.